Hello, everybody, and welcome to the January 3rd, 2019 edition of the Ephrom Josine Show. I am your host, Ephrom Josine. Now, the new Congress is being appointed today, and as such, that also means that Democrats officially have the majority in the House of Representatives, and they officially have Nancy Pelosi as the Speaker, and she will be for the rest of the Donald Trump administration, assuming she doesn't randomly resign. The first act the new Democratic-controlled House is trying to do is get a pay-as-you-go or pay-go rule for the next term, for the next session of Congress. According to Vox, the rule means any legislation increasing mandatory spending or cutting taxes and therefore increasing the deficit over the next 10 years would have to be offset with budget cuts to mandatory spending or tax increases. This rule can only be waived with a majority vote. In which case, I am mixed on this. However, here are some things that you must know. First off, the average American does not care about the deficit. That's just an objective fact because most of them are running a deficit themselves. Credit card debt, student loan debt, house mortgage debt, and much more have been increasing and build up over the years. The average American doesn't really care what the government's budget is because they don't have a balanced budget themselves. However, I also do think that this could be a good example of playing politics. Now, I know that sounds contradictory to what I just said, however, hear me out. Republicans have been running as the party of fiscal responsibility since around the 80s. However, the first time a fiscal responsibility rule is being put on them, they seem to be all against it. At least the House Democrats are putting it on them, so now they seem to be against it. What gives? I guess they don't really care about fiscal responsibility. Wait, you mean everyone already knew that? Oh, so this is just pointless then. It seems like the rule is going to pass, though, as only 3 Democratic representatives, those being Ro Khanna of California, Tim Ryan of Ohio, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, have spoken out against it. Although it is possible more will speak out against it as time goes on. Ro Khanna said in a tweet that, quote, "it is terrible economics," and saying that, quote, "pay-go would be a terrible policy that disarms the incoming Democratic majority's ability to govern." This is something that I agree with. If you look at some of the greatest successes in the Democratic Party's history, most famously under the FDR administration with things like World War II, the New Deal, and then the GI Bill afterwards, those caused huge amounts of debts. However, they were also later turned out to be investments, especially the GI Bill. And as such, the deficit in the short term was clearly worth it. Quite frankly, the only reason I'm not screaming tyrannical is because the majority party is doing it to themselves, which doesn't make any sense when you're trying to play politics, but nothing has made sense ever, so, eh. Although here's some good news about what could be happening in this session. This comes from us from vtdigger.com, or .org, my bad. Lawmakers to propose ranked choice voting in upcoming session. The upcoming legislative session will see a push among some lawmakers to change the way Vermonters will cast their ballots during elections. This is, of course, coming to us from the state of Vermont, which is the state Bernie Sanders is from, so you know something is good. And may I remind you that I believe Maryland, or no, it's not Maryland, it's Maine, adapted this system already, and it worked well in their election. At least it worked better than their previous. The sky didn't fall there, and now Vermont seems to be jumping on the same bandwagon that another state is doing. It's almost like this is a good idea. Ranked choice voting is, of course, a different system from the one we have in most of the U.S., where instead of just simply picking who you're going to vote for, you actually rank the candidates, and then if none of the candidates get a majority, they go through the second pick until either one gets a majority or all the others have been eliminated, assuming they eliminate the candidate with the least votes each time. It's a much better system than the one we have in the U.S. and has been proven to work all across the Western world, and I support the United States moving to such a system. This would also allow third parties and smaller candidates to have a better chance instead of our current system where voting for a third party is a waste of a vote, because now you get all the votes and there's no reason to waste them. There's really no way to waste them at that point. Now let's move on to the economy. Apple recently announced that they will have that their sales will fall short, citing Donald Trump's trade war. Now, who could have saw that coming? Who could have saw that putting tariffs on companies that primarily make products in other countries would cause the prices to rise and therefore not actually create jobs, but instead just cause them to become more expensive, therefore making them have to pay more or have the product cost more in order to make up the costs, and then causing sales to go down, causing more and more issues until eventually the company just goes out of business. Who could have predicted this besides 100% of economists who support free trade and the guy you're currently watching who warned of an economic recession really early on when this trade war started? Because trade wars are typically a very bad idea. But the president really doesn't seem to care. In fact, he recently held a meeting with a giant "Sanctions are coming" poster in the middle of the desk. Because when you're already doing all this protectionism, why not add some more? Just hit the common worker a little harder. Am I the only one who sees a problem here? In other news, Elizabeth Warren is continuing her presidential campaign by doing an Instagram stream where she drinks beer. Because to prove you're in line with the common worker, you drink alcohol. Makes sense. Now, to be fair, I don't know whether or not this was a political calculation or whether or not Elizabeth Warren just actually likes the taste. Both of which are perfectly valid options. However, I just find it funny how many candidates are doing it now. I mean, we know Warren, Cortez has also done it, and I believe both Gillibrand and Harris have also done it, and they're potential 2020 candidates. It's this attitude in politics now that you're running to be someone's friend, and the worst example of this so far has probably been Julian Castro, who didn't say a word about policy, but instead just talked about how he is from Texas and his family was poor. I don't know if you knew that. Now, let's ignore the fact he increased crime in a suburb by 1,700% with this weird reverse gentrification policy, which isn't even progressive at that point. You're not even not progressive. You're doing this weird circle where it's the progressive policy is no gentrification, the non-progressive policy is gentrification, your policy is reverse gentrification. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. And so, you're kind of progressive. Nothing about Julian Castro makes any sense is what I'm saying, and this was supposed to be about Elizabeth Warren. This is going very well, I can tell. Anyway, that's 4 stories in one night, and that's more than we normally do here. So, I'm Ephrom, and good night.